It's time now for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good morning, all. Al, I think we all were thinking 7 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, that the Dobbs decision from the Supreme Court that basically overruled Roe versus Wade was going to be a major player, the factor, I should say, in the midterms. Recent polls say that's not happening. The Dobbs decision impact had a very short shelf life, and more I'm hearing that we're headed toward a major victory for the Republicans. We're still 3 weeks away by my count. So I'm sure you're going to say anything can happen, but where do you find us at this point?
Well, I think the movement in the last month or so has not been good news for the Democrats. We started this year with the fundamentals, Biden's low approval rating, and the issues that were most important to most Americans, inflation, crime, immigration, all favoring the Republicans. And all through the spring, we were talking about a big Republican wave. Then we had the Dobbs decision, and we had the gun decision by the court in the January 6th hearings. And over the summer, there was some movement toward the Democrats. Clearly, the Dobbs decision energized a lot of Democratic voters, women, and that tightened the polls a lot. But, I've said all year that the real issue is whether it's going to be, this election will be decided on the Republican turf, which is inflation, crime, and immigration, or the Democratic turf, which is abortion, threats to democracy, and climate change. And it looks more and more like this is going to be a normal election, and it's going to move on economic terms. So the issue break has certainly helped the Republicans. And that's pretty evident in where the major prognosticators have gone. I mean, 538, for example, has moved from they do odds on the percent that each party would win, and in the House they've gone to 77-23 for the Republicans taken over, and that's a 6-point movement in the last month. In the Senate, they still have the Democrats slightly favored at 61-39, but that's been a 10-point shift toward the Republicans. And if you look at the polling, the big divide between college-educated and non-college educated vote is starting to break normally, and that's usually a dominant factor, and that goes toward the Republicans. And so the House generic vote now, I think Real Clear Politics has the Republicans up a little bit. Democrats have been up. But most importantly in the Senate, it's going to boil down to probably 4 seats: Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Wisconsin. And in every one of those except for Georgia, over the last month, there's been a movement in the 538 odds of 10 points or more toward the Republican candidate. Now, in Pennsylvania, for example, they still have Fetterman favored, and he's still leading in the polls. But I've mentioned all year that I've been nervous about that one even before his stroke, and it's certainly tightening. Georgia, Warnock is a slight favorite, but after all that Herschel Walker has gone through, to imagine that it's going to be tight is pretty amazing, but it's a Republican state, probably in off-year elections anyway. So that one's going to be tight. Wisconsin has basically moved to a pretty solid Republican. I mean, Ron Johnson has a 3 and 4 chance of winning according to 538. And the one that is really it's moved 14 points toward the Republicans is Nevada. And Nevada looks like it's a really good chance of a Republican pickup, which means that if the Democrats are going to hold the Senate, they've got to hold Pennsylvania. And I think we'll be spending a lot of time on election night looking at Pennsylvania. You can see the shift in what Biden has been doing this week. I mean, he did his big thing on abortion where he said the first bill he introduced in the next Congress is to codify Roe versus Wade. And yesterday he did another big hit on the strategic oil reserve to just deal with gas prices, which just started to go up. So that is an indication to me that the White House is saying it as I just suggested. So barring a last minute shift, I think it's pretty clear that the Republicans win the House. And I'd say the Senate is 50-50, but if I were to bet right now, I'd guess the Republicans might pick up a seat.
Craig, this is an interesting pattern that Al has pushed out here. Do you feel like it's going to be a wipeout?
You know, before I joined the celebration of Republican victories, I'm a little bit less certain. I know the House at this point clearly is tilting towards Republicans, but the fact is these numbers seem to be moving awfully fast as far as I'm concerned. And there's just under 3 weeks left, but that doesn't mean they don't move back some. I think the interesting dynamic among the Democrats that I've been watching is that you have a chief of staff, Ron Klain, according to reports, reading the AAA fuel price numbers every morning to keep track of what's happening with gasoline prices, because he knows that affects people. And as Al said, and I totally agree, these pocketbook issues really matter. And as important and as emotional, and in some ways as divisive as the abortion issue is, it doesn't affect most voters on a daily basis like these pocketbook issues. And so gasoline prices, crime has been listed now, I saw in some of these close races, as a #1 issue in people's minds. The crime issues are in the news. Suddenly the Supreme Court and the abortion decision is not so much in the news. So things move very quickly to, as Al says, sort of traditional issues that affect these midterm elections. What I don't understand is whether Democrats will return to the abortion issue, the pro-choice issue, to motivate voters. Biden is there, and it strikes me as almost an internal debate going on as to whether you need to attack the economic and crime issues, or whether you need to try to go motivate your voters, motivate the base on issues of personal freedoms and abortions and that sort of thing. And I, in the end of the day, that debate we'll study it after the election. At the end of the day, there are issues that are going to motivate Democratic voters and bring them to the polls. And in a strange way, this confidence among Republicans is going to drive more Democratic voters to the polls, and probably cause some Republicans to, step back a little bit, figuring, well, this is coming our way. So I think the dynamics are still very much in flux. I am not so sure that Republicans can gain the Senate, but it does appear more likely they'll gain the House. But there's a lot of time left here. I will say this, that the possibility of Republicans controlling the House and Senate, while something I appreciate and in many ways would like to see, it does spell for Washington a very difficult 2 years for the Biden administration in terms of getting anything done. And that has consequences for the nation. So there's a lot still riding on this election and a lot of uncertainty.
Al, the other interesting that's happened in the last 2 days, as out of nowhere, Leader McCarthy has indicated that Republicans will be reviewing the United States support of Ukraine. Would that kind of issue create some kind of break for the Democrats?
I think that Leader McCarthy is a disaster, and I can't put it in any other words. I mean, he's made it clear that his agenda, and maybe this is just to keep Donald Trump from opposing him for speaker, is to damage and attack the Biden and investigate the Biden administration and not govern. But to be honest with you, I don't think in the last 3 weeks of the election, a statement which he'll probably walk back a little bit about not funding Ukraine. I mean, he basically said we're going to be a watchdog. I don't think it's going to make much impact. I think one of the things that's interesting that Craig raised is that, I mean, as I understand it, and I haven't seen this all over the country because I just don't have the ways to do it, but most of the Democratic ads have been on abortion. And most of the Republican ads, at least in those key states, have been on crime. And that is a pretty good indication of how people think they're going to, or how the parties think they're going to get their base out. And I guess really the Senate may very well be decided in the suburbs of Philadelphia, whether their fear of crime and all the awful things that have been happening in Philadelphia on the crime front that have hurt the Democrats, including a DA that doesn't seem to want to prosecute, and whether that will overwhelm the force that has been pretty strong in the last 2 or 3 elections since 2018, which is suburban women and college graduates in those Philadelphia suburbs voting against Trump, and really the abortion issue being an important issue there. So I think you'll see a real test of which party's agenda will win in those Philadelphia suburbs, and that probably will decide who controls the United States Senate.
Craig, you do have the last word, but I also want to kind of get your thoughts on this. But at the end of the day, we continue to say the Republican Party. This could be the real test for the Trump Party, isn't it the case? I mean, if the Senate is lost from the Democrats and the House is lost, it seems like Mr. Trump wins the most.
He certainly has candidates in this race that he's supported. Let's see how they turn out. But here's another way to think about it. What does Kevin McCarthy do if he actually wakes up as Speaker of the House of Representatives? This is something a young man from Bakersfield could hardly have imagined happening. And I don't know that their loyalty extends to Trump. I mean, we now know that he yelled at the president that people are trying to kill him, and then he embraces Trump. And to your point about, where he is on Ukraine, this is an individual who knows one thing, and I believe one thing only, and that's how to amass political power. And he will have achieved his objective. I don't know whether it stops with Speaker, but he certainly will have achieved his objective in the House of Representatives, where he's worked as a staffer or as a member of Congress for decades. What does he do after that? He doesn't really have a strong policy, set of principles or values. The Ukraine comment shows that he's liable to say almost anything and separate himself from American foreign policy and, frankly, the policy of most of the developed nations of the world. So I don't know. It's the one thing that worries me about the Republican victories in the House. that we'll get leadership that will simply create a whole new set of problems. I actually think Trump is, and we've said this for weeks and weeks and weeks here, Trump has been diminished week after week after week. And after these elections, if he wants to claim he was victorious in some way, fine. But I think the leaders on the Republican side, and if McConnell's the leader, especially McConnell on the Senate side, they're going to move away from Trump as fast as they can.
Yeah, we have to leave it there. Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thank you very much indeed. We will see you next week.